I found improvisation to be defined as the act of dealing with the unforeseen without the benefit of preparation. The events industry is so sensitive to changes in the external environment that internationally, like, events are often involved with international mobility. So improvisation can be such a useful skill for workplaces to be equipped with. And the industry already use this in the day-to-day. So with events, things change last minute and there are issues all the time that planners and coordinators have to adapt to. So they already have the skills so they can utilize this. Obviously, we've learned from COVID that there are situations that impact the events on a more critical level than what event organisers or planners are used to dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So usually that would be internal issues. But as we have seen, there are external major issues that can threaten the survival of the business. And it's about being prepared to tackle these to help the company survive and to see if there is a possibility to utilize the negative and turn it into a positive and find opportunities to develop and grow the company. Ultimately, I found that improvisation was important for organizations for making the best out of a bad situation. So it was recognizing the need to do something rather than nothing, and which a lot found that there was potential for growth and innovation, because they recognized the possibilities of their company and their skills. So for a lot of them, this was progression. They managed to expand, learn new things, and it also changed their attitudes towards working. A lot of them, they found it improved their motivation for work. So one organisation managed to change their whole business model. They told me they changed from the event organisation sort of side of things into a whole event agency. And they realised with the pandemic, they weren't able to carry out events in person, but they still had the skills and the teamwork and the motivation amongst them to be able to carry on. And they recognised these assets they had and utilised them to make something else, which ultimately led to expanding and changing the whole business, really. Trial and error was key. So they would try something, ask questions like, did it work? What can we do more? And just reflecting on each experience and learning from that. Learning was very key, and that's been mentioned in the literature before on improvisation, is it is an organisational learning activity. So you learn from the mistakes and you take what was good and you develop it further for next time. A lot of them mentioned before, especially at the beginning stages of the pandemic, they lost motivation and they didn't work well together as a team. There was some mentioned conflict between the team, and having such a potentially harmful situation like the pandemic hit brought a lot of the teams closer together. They had to work together and use teamwork. And this ultimately carried on through after the pandemic, where it was such a critical situation. There were a lot of emotional factors involved within dealing with the pandemic inside and outside of work. People really came together to support each other in the workplace. And this carried on through, and it helped to bring out the motivation in people and work together. And once they improvised and things started working out, it pushed them forward to carry on going and achieve new things. So when you're improvising, and what I found when they improvised and it went successfully, it was motivational. So what I found was there were facilitators and barriers to effective improvisation. So not just improvisation that helps, not just improvisation in tackling the issue, but effective, so that helped them to move forward. And organisations that achieved this mentioned themes like teamwork, a proactive mindset, so a positive attitude towards working through it, because it was quite a detrimental situation that people approached very differently. But those that were proactive about it and utilised the skills and the assets they already have with their team were able to move forward. And what I found was most important was the opportunity identification. And this often came from organisations where they took contribution from the whole team, and it was a lot of group decisions. So you would get all kinds of input to come up with something they could do. And yeah, using their existing skills in the industry, they were so relevant in this situation. So I think it's important for companies to work on communication amongst their team, even if people are in different departments. Everyone's skills are relevant when it comes to improvising and working through such a drastic situation. So if they have effective communication, it's going to help build relationships and help people to support each other going through this. So with all team contribution, you can achieve better outcomes. And that's what we found in this study, is those that did that and worked together and had this flat level structure tend to achieve the more progressive outcomes, more than just surviving the pandemic. They actually progressed the company. Another thing that was very important was the leadership, how managers approached the situation and whether they took the input of the rest of their team and, recognised their abilities. So for an organisation to be prepared, it's drawing on these facilitators and recognising what can be used and working as a team, really. And also steering away from the barriers. So for some, they had lack of experience with dealing with anything of this kind, which most people did because we'd never experienced a pandemic before. But some had been, worked in such a turbulent environment and been faced with issues so frequently that they approached it in a similar way that they would approach the minor issues. Also, one of the companies mentioned that before the pandemic, they were quite siloed. So within their organisation, it was such a big organisation with lots of little teams that didn't really communicate well together. And they found going through the process of working through the pandemic that they need to work together and they need to help each other and utilise each skills in each department. And this helped them eventually. Once they recognised this helped them to work through it. So although they experienced barriers, it wasn't the end of it. They were able to work through it. And a risk-averse mindset as well was key. It took a lot of risk-taking for some companies, especially changing your whole business model when you've developed it for a certain number of years. It's a big risk, and it was one that they felt that they had to take to be able to work through it. And luckily it worked out well, but if you don't take the risk, you're not going to know.